Yes.
Were the words spread fast?
You guys will.
I watched the board meeting this morning. I was slacking last night and when I just fell asleep.
Watching the.
I really wish to look on
I told Jim, isn't Joselle ready to send you back to work? Because right now, when he's
Call the special meeting to order. The time is now 1:03. First item on our agenda is our Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, and the symbol of perfect friendship and united culture. Next item is roll call. Roll call, please.
Board Member Dennis Romero, Board Member Mrs. Elaine Martinez Gonzalez,
Present.
Board Secretary Dr. Joyce Meserve, Board Vice President Dr. Kimberly Blaya,
Present.
Board President Paul Gonzalez.
Present.
Next item is our approval of our agenda. Do I have
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
a motion by Dr. Brea? Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Gonzalez. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion passes. And our next item is our work session. So,
Mr. Chair, I hand the floor over to our lovely facilitators.
Right, and I think I have to turn this on, correct? Is it on or is it not? So
Right.
Is it on? I told it probably. Test. Nope. Yeah. That's fine. Okay, I got it. All right. It's been a while since I've had to do that. All right, so I know it's Friday, everybody has a lot on mind, everybody's always thinking, where do we need to be? We're gonna be right here in this moment. If we can get through, I think we can do some really good work in a good way, so we don't have to take the whole afternoon. But just to reintroduce myself, Yolanda Latoya Cordova, I was here, your first meeting with David, not your first meeting, but the meeting where you had the last work session. And I had mentioned at that time, I work for CES as a board consultant, board coach. So I am working predominantly across the state doing board governance training, and it really is around key pieces that you're going to do today around goal setting and also guardrail setting. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But with me is Teresa Salazar. And Teresa, do you want to just introduce yourself real quick?
Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. Mr. Chavez was double booked, and so I was excited to get to come to Las Vegas. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at CES. This is my third year. I'm a retired superintendent after 34 years, started teaching, principal, and so this is the work I like to do, so I'm excited to get to be out here with you, so thank you very much.
So I think what you're hearing really quickly is that CES is the place where retirees go to fail to retire. So we have failed to retire because I'm also a retired person. I retired from state government, but I also retired from a school board. So last time I was here, I mentioned that I was on the APS school board for 6 years. My last 2 years, I was board president, and in that last 2 years, we actually brought this framework that CES has been adopting, and we've been training school boards and districts in terms of helping around the pieces that we're doing in goal setting, strategic planning, and so on and so forth. So I thought where we could start today, and this is going to kind of awkward, I'm going to put up here. I'll do my best. I'm not Mr. Chavez with a computer, as long as he was here. So the last time we were here, we went over the vision, mission. Let me pull that up really quickly. And you all had spent time doing all of this key work up at the top. And that was your vision, mission, and values. And hopefully, I think some really good work. What I do want to say, oh, it's not showing up there. How do I need to turn this one off? There it is. Okay. So the last time we were here, the first parts were where you guys have been on this journey. You already did your community work. You already have a chance to listen to that. So now the board and superintendent and the key staff are finalizing all of that you've heard, finalizing your vision, your mission, your values. Hopefully you've had a chance to go through this and really come together and say, yes, this is what we want, no, it's not. But here's what I want to say in all of the work that we're doing. This is still all a drafting stage. And so everything that you're doing, from my perspective, and superintendent, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but from my perspective, it's kind of setting the table for like the next school year that's going to start. So, and it's great, it's perfect timing because you're going to still have time to massage this, to make it your own. And so our job right now is just to kind of like walk you through these pieces, knowing that you as a board may have some work sessions that are going to happen outside with us, not even in the room, but you as a team pulling that part together. Our job is to kind of help you sort of set the scaffolding, if you will. You guys are going to put the meat on the bones and making sure it's what you want and it fully is everything that is representative of you as a group. Sometimes that's hard to do with people who are not part of your team in the room, right? I remember when I was on the board and we had this work being done with us, we waited until our consultant was gone too, so that we could say, okay, now it's time for us, we can take a deep breath. So kind of think of us as like the coach and the guidance to sort of help you, walk you through the things, but knowing that you as a team are still gonna flesh these things out. So I'm not gonna go over all of this part again, we're not going to rehash this, but this is still food for thought, and this is the place where you all, we've put it into this document that you're gonna get all of these pieces. What we're gonna do today is we're actually gonna focus on, I think is what is really the meat and potatoes of the beginnings of a strategic plan, and that's really to settle into goals and to what I also like to call guardrails. And we'll talk a little bit about what those are and what they're not, so that will help you also to sort of put a frame into how to think about it. So I'm going to lead you through an exercise after I just do a really quick introduction around this framework. So we do know that a foundational principle that we've been hearing about really good, strong governance is that student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change, right? It's not about the students just by themselves. Students really rely on us as adults, and it's our behaviors that are really the ones that have to change. We're the ones in the room. And so when we think of like whose behaviors need to change, it's really about all of the things we're going to be asking teachers to do, staff to do, all of those various people that lead the district to help really get us to this point where the outcomes for our students are going to change. And I want you to think about this word outcome because it's different than an input or an output, right? Because you can have a lot of good inputs, and we're going to talk about what those are, and a lot of good outputs, and still not have great student outcomes. So when I think of student outcomes, I think of all those things that we want students to know and be able to do. So what should students know and be able to do as a result of coming through your district, right? That's at the end of the day. That's really why it all matters, right? I love this whole notion too that the only reason a school system exists is to improve student outcomes. That's it. And the only reason, when I heard this as a board member, the only reason you exist, board members, is to improve student outcomes. So, and that's where your accountability lies. So the accountability for board members is really around how your students are doing. And that's how we're measured. That's how people vote for us, right? They vote for us because the expectation is that you're going to be the best representative for us to get in there, do the hard work. But what we want you to do is to make sure that our students know, they know there's things that they know and they're able to do as a result of coming to that district. We also know that as a school board, you only have power as a board and not as an individual. So the power of the board lies in this room when you're all together on the dais, making decisions, looking at things. As an individual, we really don't wield this, that's not where the power lies. The power lies in our ability to work as a board, make decisions, review things, balance a budget, review a budget, make policy. Those are the times, and hire and evaluate your superintendent. This is where the magic happens, is in this boardroom. But always remember that the only reason the school system exists is to improve student outcomes, okay? So in order to meet this challenge of effective governance in this, the board has to be focused on changing adult behaviors, starting with your own. So there are things that, as a board member, I had to learn how to do differently than I was doing before. My first 4 years on the APS school board, I tell everyone, I had no idea what we were measuring. I really didn't. We would get reports at the end of the year. We'd learn that our students did not do well, or they did do well. And I remember just sitting there thinking, well, what did we do well that made them do well? And what did we do poorly that made them do so poorly? But by the time we were reviewing information, it was already too late. It's the end. And at that point, I like to call it an autopsy report, right? It's like, what happened? You know, we're looking at it. So in order to change the mindset of this too, I knew that as a board we had to do something differently as a board. We also needed to set really clear priorities, which we had not done. We had not set those clear priorities. And when I think of clarifying priorities, there are two areas. One is around the vision and the goals. So remember that the board represents the vision and the values of the community. So you've been elected to represent the constituents out there who are telling you, this is what I want for my students in this district. So you represent that vision and value, not your own vision and values, but the vision and values of the community that you serve. It's a really tough place to be in, because sometimes, as board members, behavior that I had to change is coming in with my own ego about that, thinking that I knew everything, and I didn't. I had to make sure that the vision that I was representing was representative of the community that I also was part of, okay? The values are also really important because your community will tell you a lot of things about what they value in the way that the school district is operated. There are things that are important to them to keep. There are things that they don't want you to continue to do. There are things that they really highly hold near and dear to their heart. I remember when I was here last time, this community really values that pride, right, in being recognized as is it the Cardinals? Yeah, and being a Cardinal, like that pride. That's a really important value for the community, and there's identity in that, right? Because I know in Las Vegas, too, it's a little smaller town, but you've got two different districts. And so that identity is really important, and I think that's an important value that has to come through somehow. And I love the way that you stated that, because it's stated in your mission and your vision. So that told me a lot about how you all already embraced that value, that it's not just for you sitting here at the dais, but it's something that's representative of the community, but also your staff is part of your community, but it was really important. But the guardrails, the values also protect certain guardrails. And when I say guardrails, I think of, you know, when you go, when I go bowling, I need the bumpers. Because my ball will always be in the gutter, right? So, and that's the way to think about guardrails. It's sort of those bumpers. You still have latitude to do things in pursuit of your goals. So as you're pursuing your goals, whatever they're going to be, and we're going to talk about what those are, in pursuit of those goals, there's some things that you still have to value, and they're kind of like shall not statements. They're kind of like things that you're not going to forsake in pursuit of those goals. And when we get to talking about this, that will become a lot clearer. Because remember, on your goals, the goals are representing what the community's vision is for also improving student outcomes. That's really what a goal is. It's really what's their vision also that they hold in their mind for what students know and should be able to do, or what we need to improve. Okay? So then, as we get through those first top three, the next three that's going to be really important, and it'll fall into place as you move through this, and that's going to be like part two, and David had talked about that. I'll be teaching on the second end of this, is really like progress monitoring. How do you get there? Because a really effective board is also monitoring your progress. Remember what I had said about APS? Wait to the end of the year, it's too late. Progress monitoring is that you're actually looking at progress that you're making as you move through those pieces, as you are implementing your goals, as you're monitoring your guardrails. There's benchmarks along the way that say we're on track or we're not. What do we need to do? Because your next one around aligning resources, your resources is your time, your talent, your treasure, everything that you have that gives you the capacity to do what you need to do. You need to make sure that it's aligned. And what I love about progress monitoring, if you need to pivot, you can. You know, because that's the time to pivot. Not when it's too late, but starting to think, are our resources truly aligned? Have we given our superintendent everything that she needs in order to actually execute this plan? And that's what progress monitoring is about. It tells you, are we on track? And your superintendent can have a really honest conversation with you about, hey, this is working for us, or this is really where our challenge lies. and the board being curious about why are there challenges, but even if you are doing well, also being curious, why is that working so well? What do we need to do to sustain that? Is that something that's going to be doable for a long period of time? And then finally, at the end, having a better way to communicate your results, because that's what this will all lead to, is now you're going to suddenly have a much better structure to communicate your results, not only amongst yourselves, but to your community, because your community is going to know, yes, our students are on track. Your staff is going to know, yes, our students are on track. And if, I love also the saying, what happens in the boardroom happens in the classroom. If you're asking teachers to use their data and to use their data to make good decisions and to do all that stuff, the board should be using its data too to make its decisions and to also do that. So it's kind of like a reflection of the leadership actually doing the same things that you're asking staff. And so that's where the behavior has to change, because I know as a board member, I had to become much more comfortable with data and knowing how to use that and knowing how it was presented, becoming curious about it, not about gotcha governance, but around this governance of like, how is that working for us? How do we do this and how do we become better? Okay, so here's how we set goals. Now remember, the goals are the community's vision, so you've already listened to your community, and I'm going to ask Denise to go make sure she gets us a copy of that page that I gave you. Yes, we have a copy. Oh, we have one? Okay. So, I lost my slides here. I'm too excited. Okay, so the goals, remember, is believing what students should know and be able to do when they graduate from your district. So you already did an amazing job of going out to the community. You have this one stratified list. What I want to ask you each to do, each board member, superintendent, I want you to think and circle the top 5 off of that list. Highlight them. That is what a student should know and be able to do that came off of that list. What does that tell? What are the top 5 things that says, and it could be 5 or 6, but I'm curious about what your community said to you should be some things that students should know and be able to do. That's the 6th one. Yeah. This is crazy. Wow. To that other one so that we can have a conversation first. And staff too, yeah. Circle what you think are the top, or at least top 5 things that students should know and be able to do. And if you need to, off of that list, maybe even right off to the side, maybe where 2 or 3 kind of combined, but it's like something that you're clearly seeing that students should know and be able to do. Because they might be combined in some way.
I guess as a clarifying question, this list has what I would say would be maybe like some organization or maybe some systemic ideas. Is that something that we can look at also?
We're going to look at that. That's going to be in our guardrail section.
Okay, so
Okay.
then just focus there.
There's
What
right now is
students
just
can do.
what should students know and be able to do? Because this is really kind of listening to the communities telling you what's their expectation for students as they graduate from this, or they experience this district from K through 12. But we're going to talk about those other areas too.
So this list is already ranked in our order, correct?
It is. So you've got a stratified list in rank order of what they said were important things, right? But what I want you to think about is, first, I just want to focus on just one of the student outcomes that also are in a rank order in there. Because sometimes the community doesn't think that way either, right? They're thinking of those other things as a means to an outcome, but not everything is an outcome. Does that make sense? Not everything that they want is particularly an outcome. It's a means to get to an outcome, but what's the outcome that they're telling you they want students to have?
And to clarify, you are wanting the things that are student specific, right? Because I'm looking at things and I'm like, okay, aging infrastructure, that's something as a district we're responsible for, and there's a longer range outcome and benefit to students, but it's not what students should know.
Right.
That's our responsibility.
Exactly. So we're going to be very simplistic right now and just picture you're a parent who's going to put your student into this district for the first time. You have all these high aspirations. Here's why I'm going to put my kid in this school, because I know they're going to come out and graduate with what is it that they know and are able to do. And don't worry about getting this right or wrong, because this is where the conversation needs to be had. Because what your community is telling you is like a bunch of the vision, a bunch of the values. But we also need to figure out like what are going to be our priorities on those student outcomes that we're going to measure to get there. The other things might be a means to get there.
But you know, it's interesting for me, because of course of the 36 items listed as priorities that we put on paper, there's very few that are direct student outcome focused. You know, so that kind of tells us, as you said, the adult mindset, right? We think of all the means to get there, but of this specific list,
Yeah, and you know
really
it's
not a whole lot directly
right.
to the student outcome.
Right, and that's exactly, thank you, you're right, you're spot on, because it is really around that adult focus where we think of the means immediately to get to the ends, but what is the end that we're trying to get to, right? The end that we're trying to get to. So I see you all kind of looking up, so give me an idea of like one thing, I'll pick on you first, Member Gonzalez, one thing, or student outcome that you saw that stood out for you. And they don't have to even be in order.
Math and reading, international math, elementary courses.
So improvements in math and reading. That was one that stood out for you. And that's something that we want students to know, be able to do. Is it measurable?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you do it over time? Yes. So you could have like a measure for like your first year, maybe your second year, maybe a third year. Okay. What's the second one, board member? Is that Missouri? Can you see? I don't have my glasses on.
I had the early interventions in the social and emotional learning for students.
So students being able to know something about that. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Basically just having more intervention in reference to like social and emotional learning for students. Like if you're teaching them how to be able to deal with their feelings or being able to how to display their anger or their sadness, or if they're related to bullying, or being able to show how they're irritable or anxious or something in the classroom, how to be able to deal with that.
And that would be helpful as you graduate what?
Well, as you're dealing with it from basically when you're in kindergarten, as you're dealing with that from in kindergarten as you're going through all of your grade levels.
Right.
So you can deal with it when you're in kindergarten, as you're going into first grade, second grade, all the way, when you're preteen, when you're a teenager, and even when you're in high school. Because when you're in high school, you're teaching the younger ones, and that's what we're doing now.
Right. So as an adult, when we get older, we have to know a lot about like self-regulation, right? We have to be able to
Verbally communicate.
not fly off the handle. There's like value to that. But I'm going to ask you this question: Is that easily measured?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just curious, and I'm looking straight at the superintendent because I want to think about that. So I'm not in opposition to that, because I think that's a really important skill, and school helps our students with that, right? It helps them around knowing how to persevere, right? To not quit too soon, because I used to work for Workforce Solutions. I was there, and one of the things that employers often said with young people is that sometimes they don't persevere, they give up too quickly. Like if the boss got mad at them on one day, they just won't show up the next day because they thought, oh, it's over, you know, and it's like, no, that's not it, you know, you still, or if they didn't do their task well their first day, they think they're a terrible person. No, that's not it. Sometimes you have to be able to persevere and keep at it to keep going, which leads back to math and reading, right? Because if you're not good at it initially, you got to keep going, and so we want our kids to persevere. Thank you. What about you?
So I did also agree, I have a second one, but I just want to emphasize, at least from my perspective, what Dr. Meserve mentioned about being more proactive, about teaching our students social emotional learning, focusing on their well-being, talk about life skills, because when, I think you said something earlier about, you know, I think you said something about being in chaos or crisis around something, and I think oftentimes in education we don't look at things more proactively, and that's why I appreciate, you know, the math and reading early intervention. When we focus on providing these supports and interventions earlier on, then when they are adults and they do go to college or they are in career, they have had all these years of practice and learning to be prepared to be productive members of society. So I definitely agree with that one. I think for me, and then they're not seeing Dr. Meserve as a psychiatrist or in my office. Discipline, right? But what I will say for me, one of the areas that I want to emphasize in addition to what the others have shared is really the stronger academic programs. And I know that, of course, it requires the district to provide AP, you know, all these different, but I'm a strong believer that if we set the expectation and the bar high and provide the opportunity and support the students to have the means to accomplish that, they'll rise to achieve that. And so for me, it's really focusing on expanding the strength of the curriculum and all courses in the district. And it's not, and shifting the mindset or the perspective of not so much that we're offering these, but these are things that we want our students to learn and participate in.
And let me push you a little bit further, so I'll ask the question, what? You know, why is that important? Because what will it lead to?
So when students have better academic performance, they take AP courses, they take, you know, even dual credit, they're better prepared for post-high school graduation.
So
college,
it's really,
career readiness, yes.
So it's that secondary piece, and a means to get there for you is more rigor, right? AP, dual credit. So it's like looking at that preparedness. So the goal is I want my students to feel really prepared, ready for that post-secondary piece, but that one of the means to get there is really pushing all of these other things that need to happen, because, and we're going to talk about inputs and outputs later, but that's a really important one. Everybody, I think every parent puts a kid in school is thinking that, right? What is my student going to be able to do as a result of coming through this district? What do they know? What do they get out? Was there one for you? It's always hard to be the last person.
Gotcha. So of course, I agree with everything you've said so far, but also on the flip end of what she's saying as far as college readiness, if you look at 14 life skills and financial literacy.
Okay.
Because we have several students who, I know, who don't want to go to college, but how do we prepare them for life, right? Financial literacy and life skills. How we measure those, I would be a discussion, but I do think it's vital.
And again, it sounds like having those life skills really lead to something that's going to help them throughout their career in your school, because it seems like, I think elementary, there's specific social skills that you're learning, right? That are really key to make it and be successful in elementary. There's really specific social skills for that middle school years, and then there's they build on each other, right? But then high school is sort of like building, because again, it's that post-secondary readiness, right? Which I just want to say, all of those things are really important. So what I heard is academics around math and reading, really critical, because it seems like those are very foundational, right? I think math and reading, I'm not a teacher, not an educator, I'm a social worker, I trade, but I'm a program manager kind of person. But I loved the whole concept when I first learned, students are learning how to read, but then they read to learn. So that it's that foundational piece of like, reading is so foundational to so much. It's foundational even for math. It's foundational for science. It's foundational for even AP, secondary, all those things. So reading comes up for me, math comes up. Social emotional learning in some aspect, I'm going to put that one off because that sounds like a goal around there. And the next one is this post-secondary readiness piece that has several means to it. AP, having more rigor, I hear the rigor, access to rigor, but also ensuring that they have access to those other pieces that are foundational for life. Like there's like financial literacy. There's probably, I worked in the child welfare arenas pretty much my early career. So I thought a lot about young people that are coming through the system, whether they're coming through child welfare, juvenile justice. The life skill pieces on that is so foundational around financial management, but it's also back to, I think, what you were talking about, Dr. Reserve, around just even like self-preservation, right? Knowing how to be healthy, just even knowing how, I will tell you, health literacy is another one that's foundational and key, right? Because knowing how to use like the medical arena, how to stay out of trouble with that, because there are so many kids that don't know how to use health insurance or know when to do it or how to even go and approach medical doctors. So medical literacy is also in there. But those are like 4 things. Is there one on that list that's been missing? Because those, essentially for me, if I was to look at this and say, those seem to be what your community said as you're looking at that list, these are 4 very foundational goals for our kids. Superintendent, would you agree with that, or is there something that's missing? Because we're going to talk about the other inputs and the other areas that are organizational, systemic pieces that are means to get there. But as we're thinking of just students in the middle, this is what we want them to know and everything. And we're assuming that all the inputs and everything's a perfect world out here. You know it's not. But at the end of the day, these are the 4 foundational, these are the major foundational pieces. Academics, math and reading, social emotional, and post-secondary readiness. Actually, I would put reading and math as 2 separate goals. A social emotional goal and a post-secondary goal. Does that sound right, Superintendent?
I would say so. I've kind of lumped them a little differently, but so in hearing everything, I think it's early intervention.
Yeah.
Social and behavioral health. I think that ties back to what you were talking a little bit about medical, the social emotional piece. So you need to have a student who wants to be here. So, when we talk about the SEL stuff, you can measure it through attendance. You can measure it by number of visits to the nurse's office or, leaving home early, right, those types of things. With the stronger academic programs, tying back to what Mr. Gonzalez mentioned with number 14, and AP programs and so on, is college and career readiness. Right? So we're prepping post-secondary and then careers. Some of them are just going to jump straight.
It's that whole post-secondary piece, right?
And then utilizing the word rigor, we're looking at depth of knowledge for all of our programs. So it's about strengthening all courses within that. So I would agree, and I think that they're all it's doable and measurable based off of what our
Are you responsible for measure? Is that right?
I think they're all responsible.
They're all responsible for measure, but like as you're looking at data and you think about, so if you think about early intervention, reading and math, right? Early intervention, it's probably where you have the best data, right? Is at those earliest, because you're hoping that if you've got good foundational skills at that elementary level, is going to be foundational for middle, for high. It doesn't always happen. I still need to measure at middle, because we know middle, what I learned is that middle school, especially around math, is where it really sort of takes a big dip. Mexico's taking a big dip everywhere, so it's not hard to say. Go ahead.
It's interesting that we're talking about this today because I met with a parent yesterday and he was very concerned about his 18-year-old son who would not come to school, failing currently. Started off the year good, came to school years prior. He's a junior, he was held back. And I brought Dr. Reddy in on this conversation with me because we're trying, he's not in special education, but we're trying to find a way to ensure that this child graduates. Because at the rate he's going, he's not going to. So how do we support those students? And Dr. Reddy came in and we have, and Dr. Reddy might be more able to speak on this, but it's called Capstone.
Yeah.
And the Capstone project, there's drawbacks to that too though, because you can only recover 6 credits. So how do we hit them earlier on, right? We're solid in elementary. I would say we're pretty solid in elementary and middle school too. But as they're starting to lead more, gain more independence and they're given a little bit more freedom maybe at home, sometimes they experiment and it takes them away from our whole goal for them, right? So for this particular student, we're not quite sure what's taking him out of school. It could be, I don't know, depression, anxiety, substance abuse.
It's that social emotional side of it.
Yeah, it's huge. And a lot of my evaluations come from that. So I think that they mentioned that 2 out of everyone here in this Sandoval, but that's a huge component that we have to find a way to get them early because now that gap is so wide. And I don't know, hopefully he comes to school. Dr. Reddy and I talked to the parent, but guess who was missing? The 18-year-old student, not there.
Right.
So it's like we can tell the parent to hear how much we are going to support their child.
It's a different conversation with the young person. I've always felt that high school is very a different engagement because it should be with the student.
Yeah.
Because now they pretty much should be in charge of a lot of things. And we have to treat them as their sort of their agency around that, right? I mean, when I think of developmentally, I know at that age in high school, they want to start to take some agency for themselves and some decision making. Now within reason, because we also know sometimes they don't, and they're not going to always make good decisions. They just don't. But if they can at least practice with agency every now and then and have some success, it builds their confidence and their resilience to start to practice that resilience, which is also a skill that you want them to have moving as an adult, right? So do we provide that opportunity as part of their educational experience to actually practice that agency? So in setting a goal, what you're trying to do, so here's what I say. You're not going to measure everything. You cannot measure everything. What you're trying to do is to lift up those goals in a way that, gives you kind of like a really fighting chance of understanding kind of the broader picture. Because what you're going to see too, and I remember the first time we started looking at our data, so APS had an early intervention goal around reading, and we focused on 3rd grade. We just said 3rd grade reading goal, and we measured just 3rd grade, but we also were very specific with ours because we drilled it down to the Yazzie Martinez subgroups because we're a big district. We have so many students. There was so much. But we knew if we could make headway with those subgroups, we're going to make headway for the district. But that doesn't need to be you. That's not where you need to be. And maybe it's looking at your data and saying, if we are golden all the way through 3rd grade or 4th grade, but then we see the dip, maybe that's where your first goal is going to be. It's like looking at your dips, looking at your data and saying, here's where we're gonna focus the goal on, because we know this is what we need to do differently. Could be, I don't know, but that's gonna be up to you all. The only thing we're gonna do today is to think about 4 to 5 goals. You shouldn't have any more than that, because you cannot measure everything. But board members, what you're gonna hear in a progress monitoring report are like all the strategies, all of the stuff that they're doing to support that. But also, it's going to be all the means that you have into meeting that goal, all of the activities, the inputs, of what I call inputs to professional development, to all of the stuff that goes into that. But the superintendent also cannot do everything in 1 year. So it's going to be stratified as you're going, and you're going to pick your top priorities and your top activities to help to do that. And then you're going to start to just monitor how are we doing in progress with that as you're going. You're going to start to hear where the opportunities are and what they're noticing about the data and what they're learning. But you're also going to hear about the challenges, where we still have struggled, where it's not working so well for us, and here's some other actions that we might need to take in order to do that. Or we might need to realign our resources to do something different because we noticed we need more support here. Your first year is literally just that, you're baselining. You're trying to figure out everything that's working, what are we noticing, what are we doing, and then as you move through years 2, 3, and 4, or however many years you're going to make your strategic plan, then you start to see. The most important part, board members, the most important part, you don't get to change your goals every year. You just don't. You got to stick with them. See, that's why these are very high-level priorities up here, because what can change each year are the actions that you're going to use to support to meet those goals that you have for that particular outcome. And you don't need to be, you want to be aspirational, because the goal should also be measurable. So if you're going to improve reading scores from, let's say you're at 35%, or I'm just making stuff up, but you want to move by year 3, you want to be at 50%. I'm just making stuff up. So you're going, it's smart, because you said what you're going to do. You're going to change reading. We're going to go from here to there in a period of time. You've already said it. So that's what you have to think about in your goals. So if you're going to set a goal for math and reading, it's got to be that. If you're going to set a goal around a post-secondary goal, it's got to be something that's measurable from here to there. And also in your social and emotional, we're going to improve from here to there. And that's the role of the board at this point, because your community has voted you in to look at this needs assessment, to come up and set those priorities that I had said earlier, identifying what your goals are. So far I hear 4. How those get measured, how they get worded, and how it finally gets fleshed out is really up to you and the superintendent. Primarily, your superintendent should be putting something together that works for her, because she's going to also have to make sure it's something that you can measure and something that is definitely got action behind it. Does that make sense, superintendent? Okay. Is there another goal that should have come up but didn't come up?
I have something to add.
Okay.
And I think for me, when I look at, of course there's these goals that are pretty standard. They'll have different wording or variation when you look at different school districts, right, throughout the state, right? And for me, when I look at what is something unique or special about Las Vegas City Schools and our community, and I think for me that's in large part includes the culture. And part of what I see, a lot of times is our community, our culture, our language, Spanish, that is not continued or taught in a way in which it's tied to culture, right? It's tied to like, and maybe I'm just extra thinking this because I went to a conference this morning and us talking with my daughter's Spanish teacher, but in seeing like how the way it's taught, I think the cultural piece of our community is something that is not.
Let's talk about that. So I'm going to go ahead and segue. So let's kind of hang on to that for a minute. So I know that Teresa has put that down. So we put down those 4 goals right now, just 4 goal areas. They're not goals, they're just goal areas, okay? So reading, math, social, emotional, something post-secondary there. Those are the 4 broad areas students should know and be able to do, okay? I want to go ahead and move us to this next part of this presentation. Let me pull up this really quick. And let's talk a little bit about, I'm sorry, I'm technocrat. Let's see. Here's my slide. How can I get the slides up?
I don't know why it's not, what you're seeing is not coming up there.
Okay. It's not, I know, it's just like not the same. Okay, let's see if I can go forward. It's going forward here, but it's not going forward there. Let me try it. It's starting to work, right? Let's just. It doesn't show the slide on there, that shows the background. Okay, well, all right. I'm gonna shift over to guardrails, because I think we need to talk a little bit about what guardrails are and what they're not, because it hits into exactly what you're talking about. So, in my slides, for some reason, it doesn't, it's not showing up well there. Let me see if I can find another slide. So I don't have one on here. Anyway, so guardrails are the things that you need to protect because they're so important to the community. And so Dr. Blair, when you were talking about the linguistic, cultural relevance to your community, I sense that that's really important in this area. That's heritage language is what I'm hearing, right? It's not so much just ELL learners, but it's just the heritage language. And that's really important to the community. So how did that come out? So what I want you, before we go there. So when I think of guardrails, I think of the things that the community tells you are so important to protect. Like don't give up, don't stop doing this, or stop doing something. We don't like it because you do this. So usually when you ask the parents, it's like, what do you like that we do? What do you not like that we do? What do you want us to continue to do? And so in your needs list, I think there's some things that they either want you, aspirational, they want you to do, or they want you to keep doing. That was really important in there. See if you can find at least 5 of those in that list that come up to you. And this one's a little bit harder because you have to imagine, like, you've got this stratified list, but you might have to ask your question in your head. I wonder why this one is so important on this list, if it's a need. Let me look at the stratified list. So, for example, if I look at address staffing shortages. So, for example, that's on there. Why would that be so important as a value to the parents when they're coming up with that? What is it that's really behind that to them?
Well, I think when you look at that one, address staffing shortages and the retention and recruitment of staff, I think what they're really communicating to us is the need for that stability in the staff, because when you have, consistent teachers, our kids are able to build relationships, rapport, trust, and we know that when students have positive relationships with their educators, they're more receptive to what they're going to learn from them. Overall, when they have, some challenges with their mental health or their well-being, they're going to go to a trusted person. So it's about creating the environment by having a culture of, in the schools and in the district where...
And how is that created? How do you retain staff and recruit staff? What really is important to be able to do that. In terms of like organizationally, what really does it also require to do? Not thinking about the students now, thinking about the adults that need to work there.
I think they need to feel empowered.
Okay.
You know, some of them come in brand new, never been a teacher, maybe came from an alternative path, and they walk into a classroom and it's chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't have the tools or the training,
It's like the preparation for them to feel like confidence, right?
absolutely, you
The
have
confidence to come in, but it also needs to be an organization that's got a culture to it, right? So the culture, yeah, go ahead.
Right, that, what is it, number 5 is climate and culture. So climate and culture,
Yeah.
it ties back to the retention not only of staff, but of students.
Right. So improving the climate and culture. So we know that in retention of staff and students, I mean, because enrollment is all, I don't know, is it an issue for you all as well? Enrollment's an issue, right? And so retention of staff requires climate and culture. Retention of students also requires climate and culture. But we also know that for retention of staff, it also requires professional development. It requires, you know, that support, like a support system for teachers, especially if they're coming in and they're feeling they're struggling, they're overwhelmed. You know, is that, I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Just like she was saying, new staff, I think that we need to value the veteran staff that are there. Because I think a lot of times they leave because they don't feel valued, they don't feel a level of respect anymore. They're not part of gaining the culture or whatever. It's not like the culture pushes them out and not uses what they know or values what they know. So I think a lot of times that's why we lose a lot of our
It's a tough,
veteran teachers.
yeah, it's a tough game, and that's like your most valuable resource,
Yes.
right? I mean, your most valuable resource for a school district is really your teaching staff, I mean, just your staff in general. So if you don't have teachers, you don't have a cadre of teachers, you have empty, you know, substitutes, you don't have classrooms, you know, so it really is kind of like the generator of like a quality indicator, right? So that's a really important one. So when I think of a guardrail on here, is that the superintendent will not, you know, will not lose sight of the fact that we need to have strong teacher retention support programs. That's an example of a guardrail. Or the superintendent will or shall ensure stronger school climate and culture as measured by something. There's something that you're measuring. But what that means is that you're just asking the superintendent to pay attention to that, but also to report it to you. It's not just go out and do actions, but as a board, if we set these particular 5 guardrails, we want you to do them, but we also want you to come and report them to me. And because they're reportable to the board, to the community. I just want to say this is not, the people that sit here as the board, they're the community. And so when that report comes forward on the guardrails, you're just basically verifying, yes, hey, we made success in this area, and you're going to be able to, as board members, to report out to the community, but you're also going to be able to evaluate your superintendent and their ability to really honor those guardrails. You're also evaluating the superintendent on their ability to execute goals. That's really important too. Both of them are important. And so that's why the guardrails become important, but they do become like systemic, organizational pieces that are foundational to make sure that the organization as a whole is also changing in some ways, really moving itself into ways to protect the values of the community. So on the heritage language, for example, the superintendent will ensure that there's opportunities for heritage language, culturally linguistic, I don't know, however you want to state it, you know, for professional development that focuses on cultural linguistic needs of the community, or that it's embedded in that. It could also be an action, though. I want to say that, because if it's part of her teacher staff retention piece, maybe one of the action items under that too is really around that action to also make sure that teachers feel like they fit that they feel like they're being valued, but they're also valued as part of the community. So, but the guardrails, like you did with goals, you want to pick no more than 5, at least 3 guardrails that just really give a picture to the superintendent of the values that are really important to protect.
But in addition to what you're saying, you know, and it kind of ties into your slide with their personal behaviors to change our own. And I don't disagree where you're saying we need to value our staff that are there, that are the older staff. But sometimes I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Because I've worked for systems that we have older staff, and by God, some of those...
We don't like change our behaviors.
Exactly. Because by God, I'm an older staff, and I know everything that I need to know, and I'm not going to change. And nobody that's newer or younger is going to come in and change my ways. And they're not going to make me change. And you dig your heels in, and you know better. So when you get, you know, you start bumping heads, and then you have to leave or whatever it is, and it's not my fault. And so you have to adapt, and you have to change, and you can't be able to do that.
Right.
So you may know everything that you think that you need to know, but you have to understand that if you're an older staff and you've been here, yes, you can be valued, and yes, you know a lot of stuff, but you have to understand that times have changed.
Right.
And the technology has changed. And I work with a lot of doctors that they type like this. And when we changed to a system that was
electronic health records, I can tell you, my brother just retired as a doc. He's 65. Man, he hated electronic health records.
I dealt with doctors that hated the electronic system, and when they had to order prescriptions, I was running from office to office to office because they were getting stuck.
Yeah.
And they would type like this.
Yeah.
And half of them would say, why do I have to do this? And they had the little prescription pad, and I said, because you can't do it any other way. So when they had to do it this way, I'd say just take your time, and we expanded their time slot so they would have to adapt. And so it's a learning curve for them. So it's having to accept the challenge and accept that you have to change sometimes with the times. And you have to be able to acknowledge that. So it's a give and take on both ends, but you have to be able to understand that you have to give and take on both ends.
Yeah.
And I think in that give and take, sorry, there has to be the guidance of what your outcome is. And if you are looking at students' outcomes, then that conversation gets diluted.
Right.
Because that should be your input.
Right.
So whatever we're looking at, we need to be very clear on what that outcome is.
And I think to echo Dr. Reserve, the key word is willingness. It has to be willingness on the teachers, the willingness on the students, the willingness on everybody. If nobody's willing, then it doesn't do anybody any good.
And it all circles back to that guardrail about climate and culture, right? So if you're creating a climate and a culture that is one about change is inevitable, because we're not going to change outcomes unless we change our behaviors. And we have to, there's a piece to that. And I agree with you, Board Member Romero, because I know with APS, huge staff, big union, lots of controversy, and it is about valuing the staff. My late husband was a teacher for 25 years at Highland High School, and he was the one that typed like this doing his IEPs, he was special ed. He also was really slow to change on things, but also it's if the board is setting this priority, it also sets a lot in motion for the superintendent to say, look, the board has set this, the community has said, this is what the expectations are, and this is where we're going to be moving to some ways to do things differently. Everybody's behavior is going to be, at some point, you're going to be asking as a board member, when you're receiving a progress monitoring report, one of the fun questions to ask is like, can you share with me a little bit about what behaviors have changed? What have you noticed about behavior change with the staff or with even students? What have we noticed, or with parents? Because student behaviors, parent behaviors also have to change in this too, because you're going to be teaching them a little bit differently as well. Because guess what, parents? Yes, you might be worried about that new building that we need to build and that new facility or the color of the uniforms for the new track team, we hear you that those are things, but you know what, as board members, we're responsible for improving student outcomes. And those things are important to you, yes, they're important to the whole community, but you need to know that those are the things that we entrust to the superintendent, because we've hired a superintendent to deal with operations, and those things are in the works. And yes, I will ask, you're upset about that, absolutely, I will ask, but there's a chain of command for us to do this. But please know that as a board member, I can tell you everything that you need to know about how well we are doing in improving student outcomes, because that's really where we want to focus. That's what we really want to do. We really want to make sure that every student that comes through this district has the best outcomes possible so that we've protected their future in some way. But all of those other operational issues, I never want to be a superintendent because it is the hardest job in the world because they have to deal with the day in, day out operational pieces, the roofs leaking, the HVAC not working, the heater not working, the hot water's not hot enough, we don't like the new football coach, we need turf over here, we want grass over there. It's just, it's unending in terms of those pieces. And parents need to know that that's not the lane where it's operating. You guys are operating in the lane of we're improving student outcomes. And while all of those things matter, and yes, you will have issues and instances that come up, but it's also making sure that you have a good communication strategy, that you guys can work that out with the superintendent together, like what communication is going to go that way, how are we going to do that communication, and then, just how are we going to resolve those issues, because those things are really critical. So in your guardrails, as you look at this, now what I want you to go back and just look at this list and think about at least, are there some that are coming up all together that seem kind of lumped together? And if you can't name it as a guardrail, just name it as something that seems really important to the community to protect, to do, or to stop doing. And if you can name at least 3 of them, that would be great. Does it make sense? The other thing I want you to think about as you're looking at this list, because this is something you're going to keep board members in your really focus stuff, if you're going to want to refer to this again and again. But start to think of things in chunks too, because your guardrails, you can't do everything. But what's really good about guardrails is you're going to come back and you can reassess your guardrails every year, not your goals. Goals you're going to set for at least 3 years, but your guardrails you might need to readjust because maybe it worked great for the first year. You go, yeah, we got that one down. Maybe we need to move to another guardrail because you're going to progress monitor guardrails a little bit differently. So think of things like maybe that really are hot buttons right now. As you're in the community and you're listening to the community, things are percolating in their ears around things that are just what they're hot about, they really want you to pay attention to. And usually the guardrails are the means. Some of the means to get there, but they're not your outcomes. There are things that you're protecting as you're working on those goals. And I do have some sample goals and guardrails that I'll share with you guys. And I want you guys, this is your homework, this is board work right now. Superintendent, yours too, you get to pick your own guardrails as well. This is okay, so let's go back and we'll go in a different direction. I'll kind of like, I'll start with you, Dr. Reserve. Is there a particular guardrail that came up for you as you were listening or looking at this? Not really. So on the list of your rankings of what the community was saying, something that was really important to protect or to keep? And we kind of bounced around and talked about that, because I know at the top, including school planning and culture, it seems to be one that's high on the list.
Well, add the social and emotional learning.
You have that listed as a goal, though.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm thinking of guardrails, things that we're going to protect or we're going to continue, we must do, kind of like protect the way as we're getting to our academic outcomes that we have here. Reading, math, social emotional learning, and post-secondary. What are some of the things that we need to protect? How about you, Dr. Liv? Is there something that
Yeah, so I kind of put some themes together, kind of what I was seeing, and two in particular that I'll emphasize is a quality environment and quality education experience. Like, this is what we want. I know, I'll use this as an example. We have very successful athletic teams, right? And that's something that we're very proud of, and year after year, we see how, the postseason performance goes, right? But that same type of quality, should be something that is throughout the entire district, right? We want the environment to be quality too, right? Not just athletics, but, the learning environment, the quality of the academic curriculum, right? And then I also have another theme or guardrail of inclusiveness and ensuring, and it's tying back to our values of equity and compassion. It's just making sure that there are different, that guardrail or that mindset that when we're doing what we're doing on behalf of our students, that we're ensuring that all different types of students are included in what we're doing.
And I heard out of yours, there was a lot in that first one. No, but that's great. Especially around that one and that quality experience, because there was something that popped out of that I saw the way that could be expressed. You said something about curriculum, right? Is there concern that the curriculum is not consistent across the district, or that is just not, it's just not there?
Well, when you look at the needs assessment specifically, number one is strengthen all courses in the district. You see the other area item, 10, stronger academic programs, right? So that desire for the highest level of quality in curriculum, clearly it came out as something that is a need in our district. I think our first year will establish that baseline and understand where we're at, but I think there is, what we're seeing at least is the desire for, I don't want to use the word better, right? But improved, or, you know, so I just phrased it as quality.
Superintendent, when you hear that, what do you hear on that?
So maybe I misunderstanding what you're talking about with regards to guardrails. So I heard you say values when you were looking at this, and in looking at some of the key words that are on this list is relationships. So preserving or building relationships with higher education, involving parents. What was it? The positive reinforcement for staff and students. That kind of goes back to the climate and so on. But to me, I think if you're talking guardrails, I'm talking about what Dr. Lea is mentioning here, it is that inclusivity, right? It's continue to include the community, and that can be internally, school community, student, staff, and the broader community. We're fortunate here in this area that we have Highlands and we have Luna Community College, right? So I think that if we're talking about guardrails, is continue to include all necessary stakeholders in the decisions that are being made. And I don't know, that's what I'm saying. I think I'm not sure if I'm understanding what your guardrails.
And I'm hearing a little bit differently. The two of you, there's some similarities, but there's some differences. So what I hear for you as an important guardrail is that is continuing those partnerships and stakeholders for just including or continuing that process, because there's some value to developing those relationships with external stakeholders, maybe internal and external stakeholders, to help to help improve the overall quality of the program, or to just for engagement, because I hear two separate things when I hear parent engagement. Parent engagement looks really different to me.
So to me, parent engagement is bringing them to the table and seeing what is of value to them, right? What is of interest. It's more than just putting on an event, a ceremony, and having them come and visit. But
so that partnership with parents, I think, looks very differently than it looks the partnership with stakeholders.
Right.
Okay, all right, so one, partnerships, okay. But what I heard in Dr. Lea's comment was around don't forsake quality in pursuit of our goals for improving reading and math, right? So like don't forsake the use of high quality materials maybe, or instructional materials. Is there any concern with that in your district? Is there a consistent use of high quality instructional material?
I think we're starting to.
You're starting to.
But I think what she's also mentioning is that there has to be equal stake in every area, not just certain.
Right.
So when we're looking at dollars, funding, that should, we should prioritize and ensure that every aspect of the system is addressed and not only focusing. You mentioned athletics, so we're even there. I think we need to improve it, what we offer all programs. But I think that's what I heard you say about that, right? Is that it should equity and access, right? Inclusivity and equal access to
Okay.
Well, and I think what I was hearing, I understand from Dr. Lea, is we put in so much protected time and making sure we have gyms and everything for our athletes. We need to make sure we put that same level of effort into our education, into our teachers, into our curriculum. If that's what.
Yeah, definitely. And I also want to emphasize that it was not like for comparison's sake to say athletics, but, and I'm thinking, we just finished the postseason of basketball, right? And we have all these, that's where a lot of our pride comes from. And knowing that we're capable of greatness and we have that mindset as a community, as a district, we have that mindset to, you know, win championships. Let's continue that same mindset when we're looking at student outcomes, their learning outcomes, right? We have a winning, I want to say a winning mindset, right? We should also make sure that that same quality, that winning mindset is present in everything we do.
And the way I'm envisioning guardrails is, what are we not willing to give up to ensure that our students continue to choose us? And when they exit our school, that they're successful in whatever they decide to do. Post-secondary education, career, certification. But when I think of that, I think of basic needs. Because we're talking about curriculum and improving instruction. But part of those basic needs are your social emotional well-being, your nutrition, feeling safe to go to an adult in the school. And from there, you can flourish, I think. And that's just where my mind goes.
So what I pulled up for you is, I pulled up a set of guardrails that look at like 4 major areas. And this is just one particular school district. You guys may lump yours that way as well. But they're looking, one, at a guardrail around curriculum and instruction. So the superintendent will not allow schools to operate without aligned, rigorous, and differentiated curriculum materials and instruction. And so what the superintendent would report to you annually is like, what kind of activities did we, how did I ensure that? Did she do it through walkthroughs? Did she notice it through, you know, just different evaluations, surveys, talking to teachers? There's a lot of ways that you can measure this and report on it. The second guardrail was around recruiting and retaining highly qualified staff, because that seemed to be another issue for your district. But the superintendent will not allow ineffective PD, unsupported behavior amongst colleagues, or lack of development for hiring and retaining qualified staff. This was just a particular board. You could name this completely different. But what I'm showing here is just they lumped their guardrails into like 4 major categories. You could do that as well with yours based on what you see. Safe and secure schools, because I know you have a lot of things around facilities too. This one happened to be around discipline, but the superintendent will not allow attendance, disciplinary behavior, social and emotional learning to go unaddressed at any school. But there was also another school that used this particular category, and they said also the superintendent will not allow facilities to go neglected and, you know, not, would really develop some strategies. The problem with that is that you can't guarantee that it will happen, because facilities is a tough one, especially when you're talking about build outs and some of the superintendents, it depends on how much money you have. There's a lot in there. But you could have something around safe and secure schools, and you know, the superintendent will not allow those things to go unaddressed in some way. But that's an area. And I will send these to you, Dr. Reserve, so you don't have to make copies.
My focus is off on the side.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then the fourth one was around family and community engagement, which is where superintendent, where you were. But this one, like the superintendent will not allow schools to operate without encouraging all stakeholders involved to build to build positive relationships and open communication. But you can also have one that's specific. The superintendent will not allow major decisions to be made without, you know, community input. As our parent engagement or something like that. And I can give you some other sample language. But this is another way that you can also lump your guardrails. You can lump it into like major categories based on what you're seeing here. And then you could have a guardrail or a description of what that guardrail is going to look like. So what I want to make the distinction here is that your goals, when you're progress monitoring, your goals are going to be monitored more frequently with much more rigor, okay? So goals should be monitored at least, I say, at least 4 times a year. Beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year, maybe summary. At least 3 or 4. And then your guardrails are only measured once a year. And that's usually just, and you can do them all together. Just how did we do overall in honoring those guardrails? Were we effective in meeting that? Does that make sense? Okay. So this is homework for you all. This is the board and the superintendent together. You need to take this and decide how you want to state your guardrails. I'm available to help you with that as you're thinking about that, but I think you might, based on how many you have here, you might want to think of categories, like this is in categories. Maybe there's 3 or 4 categories that rise to the top for you, but remember, you're not going to get to all of this in 1 year. This is a marathon, it's not a race. You have to chunk your time out, and you're going to create a strategic plan that, what are you planning, 3 years, superintendent? 3? Okay. 3 makes a lot of sense. I like 3 years, I really do. So you will come up with that, so your 3-year goals will be, you know, you're going to go from year, whatever year you start in, so it's going to be the 26, 27 baseline to whatever the 3rd year is. That's my goal is going to be this. I'll show you this goals here. I know we still can't read these very well. I don't like that one. I know, there's some really bad ones in here, so. You can't really, but the percent of 3rd grade students who show proficient or advanced in reading on the NMASA will increase from 39% in the spring of 2024 to at least 50% by the spring of 2029. That's the goal. That's the overarching goal of where we're going to go. What's under that are interim goals, superintendent, that you might have to meet that goal. So the first one is proficiency. That is going to be shown in kindergarten. The second one is proficiency in 1st grade and proficiency in 2nd grade. So when the progress monitoring comes and reports, you're reporting based like that. So you can have interim measures that are being used for that overall goal. If you're just doing an overall literacy goal for your entire elementary, you would use whatever your baseline is now to whatever you want to be in 3 years. And you could have an interim, and you can just say you're going to do maybe first, I would do like maybe 1st, 3rd, and 5th, or something like that, because you're going to stratify your different ages in there. Because if they're not doing well in kindergarten, they're not going to do well in 1st. They're not doing well in 1st, they're not going to do well in 3rd, or 2nd, 3rd. So you can also do it that way.
So just a question, Jennifer, like say, using this as an example, if we're supposed to monitor that progress every 3 or 4 months, what tools do our superintendent and our staff need to be able to provide that data as a whole to not only us as a board, but to each other as a team so that we can
That's part
monitor?
2. You're moving on, because that's the next part. But the first thing that you all need to do, the first most important thing for you to do is you need to settle on what your goals are going to be and what your guardrails are going to be. And that's the homework that you all have. We can't do that part for you because this is based on what your community has told you here, what you believe you're hearing. I've already heard 4 goals. I clearly hear 4 goals. I don't hear your guardrails yet because I think you guys need to do this. We could go through this today and we can try to chunk it out, but I'm getting an impression that maybe categories of guardrails that you want to protect around where I had those up here. Maybe one around curriculum and instruction, or maybe it's called quality education. I don't know. Maybe a second around recruiting and retaining, because that seems to be a really important one that's coming up. Maybe this different one, not on safe and secure schools, but maybe something around I don't really even think you have one in that. That one doesn't fit for me. But the 4th one does, family and community engagement.
Sorry to interrupt, but like not necessarily safe and secure schools, but like if we look at number 9, anti-bullying classes, number 17, improve campus security. So of course I think it's that emotional security for our students to know that they're in a safe learning environment. And then you can obviously tie in involving parents, right? So we need to involve our parents about the level of bullying that's going on. Obviously, I think bullying is always happening, but obviously now with phones and social media, there's different avenues
Right.
for that bullying. So I think maybe not specifically a secure school, but it's certainly a safe environment. I guess we could kind of.
Or maybe it goes to improving that school climate and culture, right? So improved school climate and culture. That, because that's sitting way up at the top as number 4.
Right.
So maybe it is the guardrail, is securing or improving school climate and culture. And underneath that is those activities, maybe some activities that you're gonna have year 1, year 2, year 3, that are gonna move you closer to that as you're looking down this list, right? So maybe it's some anti-bullying training. Maybe it is
Securing the campus or something.
securing the campuses, those kinds of things, and then you would be able to show progress on those. You check them off. You still could have it as a category for a guardrail that you're protecting, but year 2, you're having some different activities. So how does that sound to you all, if you did just your categories? Curriculum and instruction or quality education seems definitely to rise to the top. I see nods. All in favor? Yeah, it's a thumbs up on that one. The second one around retaining and recruiting high-quality staff seems to be another one that is going to, because it's not just about the new teachers, to Board Member Romero's issue, it's not just about the new teachers, but it's also retaining our staff and also making sure that there's some quality pieces that we're doing to assure their retention, right? Their retention, and also maybe just the value of the expertise that they might bring into that as well. And then your third one is still safe and secure schools, but looking at some of those pieces. And then the fourth one, it's not, because this goes to Superintendent, what you were talking about in terms of those relationships, but maybe the fourth guardrail around protecting relationships and family and community relationships and engagement. I think it's both of that, because it's not just about the engagement. It was really important. I heard that word, that value come out about relationship. So maybe it's family and community relationships and engagement, because engagement looks different, and engagement feels different for parents and it feels different for stakeholders.
But number 3 was something, not so much safe and secure schools, it was more of the climate, right?
Oh, that's right, you're right. Improving school climate and culture as guardrail number 3. Did you get those?
So rigorous and quality education curriculum is kind of the first one. Recruiting, retention, and qualified staff. Safe and secure schools with a climate and culture.
Just improving school climate and culture is what we're going to name guardrail number 3.
So take out the safe and secure.
Yes, but improving. And the first one was really quality education. Just, is quality education hit it for you, Dr. Romero, or is it, because I'm trying to think of equity in there as well. An equitable and quality education?
I think so.
Okay. All right, we'll show you that stuff. But that sort of frames for you already. You've got 4 goals, you've got 4 guardrails. I'm going to stop here for a second because this is really important. Superintendent, how does that feel to you?
Quality and retention and recruitment, climate and culture, what was the other one?
Protecting relationships, really that one goes along with improving climate and culture, so I think you probably, that 4th really is part of your 3rd, right?
Well, no, the 4th one is more dealing with the community. The 3rd one is dealing with the school.
Schools,
Yeah.
so protecting relationships, families, and the community
Yeah.
is what I had it as, is protecting relationships, families, and the community.
And you guys may title these different.
And yeah, change it, but this is kind of the overall.
And what I'll do is, as Teresa's typed these up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in what I think is a draft, some guardrail thingies. How would you state this is a guardrail? But if you've got those categories, because you're looking at all of these things, and this was really important to you, Dr. Blair, was saying, and to you, Superintendent, it's like, how do we address all this other stuff, right? Because everything is coming up on this list. Does a lot of this seem to fit in one of those 4 categories as a guardrail? What's missing for you? And you're not going to get to all of them in the first year, but is there going to be a way for you to address it as you're moving through 3 years?
I think that, and even the board can correct me if I'm wrong, and it's not so much a high, it doesn't appear so much as a high level need here.
Okay.
But there's a number 15, plan to begin aging infrastructure. So I think that there's some value to discuss, you know, the facilities, the systems, right? So they have number 36, an auditorium providing transportation. So looking at that systems piece, IT support, making sure that we're ADA compliant. So I think that there's little pockets within this, you know, when we're talking about campus security, that's not only people or bodies, but it's
Cameras.
it's right? So I think that, you know, still tied to that, there's got to be something that, the board last night, we had the conversation about, you know, building a new school. So I think that that has to remain a focus of the board where we're looking at the aging infrastructure of antiquated systems. So that eventually is going to have to be addressed.
So I have some thoughts on that, because I know that, so let me just share a story with APS. One of the things that we did when we adopted this framework, we wiped the slate clean on all of our committees, because I don't know if you guys ever watched an APS board meeting. You could have, because we have one every night. I'm serious. The only night we didn't meet was Friday, but we had board meetings like all the time, because we had too many committees. But one of the committees that we continued to keep to some degree was, and they called it something else. We got rid of calling it just infrastructure and facilities, like a facilities committee. But what we did is we called it a committee around restructuring and because we had to deal with things like declining enrollment, needing to repurpose schools. We also needed to, as we're moving population sizes at schools, we had to put new IT systems in, we had to change infrastructure. So we called it kind of like a right-sizing infrastructure committee, and that committee only met like once a month. And it literally is to deal with infrastructure and to deal with everything that's related to construction, and because that money is very different, would you agree? I mean, that funding is a very different cycle and it runs different. But we ran it as a committee, and it wasn't a committee of the whole. So we had kind of like 3 board members assigned to it because it wasn't a quorum, and then they would just come and make reports to the community. And if there was like decisions that needed to be made, at least the board was aware of what was going on. So we handled it that way, and they continue to handle that way. And it seems like school districts are having to do that because declining enrollment, aging infrastructure is like an issue everybody's dealing with. And so it doesn't mean that you forsake that, but it doesn't get blended in with like all the stuff that you're trying to do around like student outcomes. Are they important to outcomes? Absolutely, because I agree, if you don't have a healthy environment, you know, place matters. And if you've got, my husband taught in a building that was condemned eventually. And I remember going to his classroom and like the back part of it, the ceiling was falling down, you know, so, and they had to put like chairs and stuff around it. So, but it does matter, you know, because when students see that and teachers have to teach in that, it's not a good environment. It's not a quality environment, so it hits into that quality education. But I would recommend that you sort of think of those things separately, and it's still part of your work as a board, but it's sort of handled differently. Does that make sense? I don't know how many committees you have, or if you have committees. How does that sound, Superintendent?
I mean, I think that's up to the board, with regard, I mean, it's work that's gotta be done anyway.
Yeah.
I agree. But what focus and emphasis, you know, that they want to put on, prioritizing, I think environment is huge. You know, and one of the things that I think, you know, these, Dr. Leah, her daughter's at the middle school, and, you know, she called me, hey, the heaters aren't working, or was it the heaters or the air conditioner, or something, you know, but extreme, temperatures that are uncomfortable. So to me, that's part of what we allow and what we accept as comfort, you know, just the bare essential, you know, for our staff and our kids to be comfortable in there. And I think it's huge.
Yeah.
You know, because I want to peer over the river to the bridge often to see, you know, why are we losing our students, and is it something that we're not providing, you know, not only academic, you know, we need to raise curriculum and so on, but do they have something that we don't have?
And it becomes so important because you are a political board, no matter what, because you do have political clout and leverage. But if you're not minding the store and you're not monitoring that work, then it's not reportable, right? You want to have a record of it so that it can also be reported to legislators. You can say, here's everything we've tried, we're hitting the mark here. So you've got it, I mean, as a board, you just have to figure out you can also easily set it as a fifth guardrail around just infrastructure and just say, you know, but the concern I have is how that's going to be measured, because it shouldn't be, because there's constraints to that. The constraints to infrastructure improvements is money. Just outright, it's like, it's the hardest one to do, but something that you might want to think about. So I don't want to say any more about that, because these are the, all right, so let's see, Teresa's got magic here, magic touch, so I'm gonna go through. But what we don't understand is why that doesn't go away. So
That's like we have to turn, walk out of it. I agree, and my system for like missing documents, like things I will understand. I would be okay with having.
still difficult.
I also recognize
There we go, okay. So here's where we are, all right. So you've got, oh, it's kind of hard to see. So you've got your mission, vision, values. You guys are going to get all of this, and this is what you're going to work out of. Nope, it doesn't have it online. Didn't come up.
which part?
None of it. I don't have the goals written down, nothing.
Stuff I've been typing up?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, let me share that with you, because you don't have it, so recently.
So can we share something real quickly? So we went to an AI conference, so we're trying to do
Oh, good.
AI, right?
No,
So
AI is
that
fun.
is what was put together. So I think some of the things that we're already discussing have come out based off of what Gemini has lumped everything in with regards to this list, which is the academic excellence in curriculum, which ties back to what quality education.
Is this a guardrail or is it a?
Well, you know, they think let's decide it, but I think it could be guardrails, right? So preserving that, and maintaining that quality education, so academic excellence in curriculum. The other four that it set were priorities was specialized student support, student well-being, and school culture. staffing and personnel support,
Okay,
community and family engagement,
okay.
and infrastructure and facilities. So those are the 5 that it.
So it's 5, those are 5 guardrail topics. So say those again, or did you hear those? How do those sound? So the first one was quality education, right?
Community and family engagement, infrastructure and facilities. So academic excellence in curriculum, specialized student support,
Specialized student support.
student well-being and school culture, staffing and personnel support,
I like that one.
infrastructure and facilities, and 6 is community and family engagement.
Okay, so you have 6 guardrails, that's a lot.
Well, I mean,
Well-
that's what it's lumped, this,
Okay.
this.
That's what it lumped those into.
So,
Oh, nice,
It's a
okay, so
matter
you
of-
stratify, oh, that's awesome, great, okay.
so I think it depends on what the board wants to identify as the 5 or 3, whatever.
Did you get those? No. They'll have to share them so we can put them on this document. I like that because it does frame the guardrail areas based on this. So you heard what they did, they stuck it into an EI and then stratified it for you, so that's good. I really like the one on staff supports, the way that it's stated. And also I really like the way that it states that one better, because it's not just about recruitment and retention, it's about staff supports, which I think really hits to what Board Member Gonzalez was talking about too in a broader sense. Because it's not just about your new teachers, but it's just the staff supports in the whole. But it's also still about that quality recruitment, the training, everything that you need there. Okay.
Would you mind sending that to Teresa, TERESA, at CES.org?
Me? Yes. What was that again?
TERESA,
Teresa,
at CES.org. It's the best email address ever.
That just came to us
Usually,
Yeah.
Teresa at CES.org. You guys remember? Okay, so what time is it? It's gonna be 3, so we're at 2:46. You've got 4 goals, drafty goals, and you've got 6 potential guardrails, okay? So, and you've got your mission, vision, values, you've got pretty much a whole document. What still needs to happen all under that is with the goals that you're looking at, it's now time to sit with the superintendent and the staff needs to get together, because this is their thing, because they've got to figure out how would we measure that? And what would they propose as measures? And you as a board, that's where you get to decide. Because you're not the experts on what their data is. They know what data comes in, when it comes in, what it looks like, and what would be the best way to measure, and what would be the best predictor of that particular goal. So if you have a goal around math and you're improving from this to this, your data experts will say, here's the best predictor of what we would use. But the actions that the superintendent's going to put in her strategic plan, now that's different, okay? So remember, your goals are way up here. You're setting the table, you're setting the stage, you have identified your priorities. The superintendent creates the journey, and the journey is created through that strategic plan. And those are the actions that she's going to decide. She's going to do year 1, and usually it's like year 1. You don't need to go all the way to year 3, but she's going to start thinking about what if I start this year with this, maybe year 2 I'll do here, through year 3 I'll do that. But the strategic plan, the superintendent owns that. That is her. That's why you hired her as an expert, and that's her job to do. And she is going to then report to you based on that. Here's year 1. Here's how we're doing on goal number 1, goal number 2, goal number 3, goal number 4. And then at some point in the year, depending on how many guardrails you have, if you have a lot, she might say, we're gonna do first 3 guardrails this time of the year, and then the second guardrails, we're gonna report this time of the year, to give you an idea of where we're going and how we're doing, okay? Once the superintendent goes back, well, first step is you have to get solid on what your goal is gonna be and what you're gonna measure. So you have to decide if it's gonna be a reading goal, what is it gonna be? What are you measuring in reading? You're going to improve reading for all students, some students, elementary students, what students? You got to say the who. This is what we're going to measure. Here's what we're going to use to measure it. And this is the time that we're going to go from this baseline. And if it's to be determined, superintendent, that's fine, but if you've got a baseline, something in mind, we're going to use this from 25% to 35%. I'm just making that up. You can do that. That's your goal. But it has to be smart. It has to be measurable, and it has to be something that will go over time. Once you have all of that done, and that's the only thing you have to do is on your goals is decide that. The goals have to be smart. Your guardrails, the superintendent's going to also decide what she's going to use to measure in years 1, 2, in years 1. Like, here's how I'm going to measure how I'm doing community engagement, or she's going to say, I'm going to see an improvement in a survey, or I'm going to do so many meetings, or whatever. She has to give herself some targets of what she wants to hit. So that way, when she reports to you, you kind of know, did she hit those targets? Is she on target? Did she do more than what she stated she was going to do? That will help you know to evaluate her as well. Did she hit those targets? And is she on, is she meeting what our contract is? Because you're contracting with her to improve student outcomes and to follow the guardrails. And to do a lot of other things. But those are the most important things that your superintendent does for you. All right.
Can you tell me again, so we're looking at 4 goals?
Yes.
We've already identified those, and how many guardrails?
But I think you read out 6 based
Right,
on.
but that was what I grouped them as, so, but are you recommending that we have,
I would say no, at least 3, no more than 5. It's hard when you go beyond that, because it's a lot of work. But, 3 to 5. The same on goals, 3 to 5. You guys have 4. I'm not too, I think your goals look pretty good. Right? It's hard to see here.
I was going to say
The quality of this is not really good. Okay, so there's your
maybe new light bulb in your projector.
Yeah.
Last leg.
Your goals are reading, math, social, emotional, and post-secondary. So you've got to come up with some sort of measure for that, superintendent and staff. You need to draft up what you think would be some good measurable goals for that, okay? And that's what you present to the board.
the goals you came up with, I'm sorry, are reading, math?
Social emotional learning, I think is what it is, social emotional, and post-secondary. Post-secondary readiness.
I don't think there was post-secondary.
Well, post-secondary was either like the college or career readiness, post-secondary after they graduate, that we're preparing them for the world, whatever that is.
So you want it college?
Which includes life skills, which could include college.
So when I heard, it was just like that overall post-secondary readiness, so post-graduation readiness. You guys can call it whatever. You don't even have to say post-secondary readiness, just say post-graduation readiness. And so that would include their ability to go either college, career, or just even straight to employment. There are some that just maybe are going to be ready. You want something that just shows that readiness post-graduation, okay? And so you need some measures for that. And remember, superintendent, you could have 3, maybe 2 or 3 internal goals of what you're going to use to measure that with. So maybe it's the overarching goal, what we're gonna get to from here to there in 3 years, and then at least 2 interim goals for each one that could be a measure for the first year. So in the first year, I'm gonna go from here to there.
And so the interim goals, just for clarification, Yolanda, they're the yearly goals.
Yes,
That's what you're gonna do
yes.
this year, and the overarching major goal is for the 3 years.
The full 3 years. And that could be your action strategies too. You'll have your, but we'll fill that out later because that's gonna be in your strategic plan. But you might wanna decide, what are you gonna do in year 1? How are you gonna measure year 1 to get there? And what are gonna be your measures for year 1 based on those particular goals? Okay, so then down into,
So then the guardrails that we kind of came up with before we put it into AI, where I have this G1 through G5, but then it very nicely has the 6 of them, and it tells you exactly, the advanced academics and foundational skills diverse, and it tells you the item numbers, so you could kind of work those in together. It's grouping for you.
okay. So the first one was on academic excellence and curriculum. The second one is specialized student supports or student supports. The next one was student well-being and school culture. So that was really around that culture. And then 4 is staffing and personnel support. So looking at it beyond just hiring, but also the personnel support that you've got. And then the 6th one, or another one on infrastructure and facilities, and the last one on community and family engagement. And those, you'll have to decide from those how you want. But you may go with all 6 of them. You might want to try your first year that way. It's okay. Your first year, here's what I'm going to say about this next process. So can you hook me back up? Okay, because you had asked a really important question, Board Member Gonzalez. I think we're done for today with this key. This was the hardest part. And you're not done yet, because you still,
there's not.
because you still have a lot of work to do, which the superintendent will go back and do with staff on all of that. And then the presentation will be made to the board. Here's what I came up with, here's what I'm looking at. You still got to massage it a little bit. At some point, what's really important, board president, is once it's all clarified, you've got your goals clearly defined, and you have clear definition and agreement on your guardrails. You've got some agreement. The board has to take action on it and approve them. So you vote on those and say, yes, we approve those. Because it becomes an actionable item. It holds you accountable to say, yes, we did adopt these, this is what we're doing. And it also sends a real clear message to the community that you've done your job, that this is what you got elected to do and this is what we've done. And then it also helps you, because I will tell you as board members, you're going to remember those goals. You're going to memorize them, you're going to know what they are. I still know APS's goals. And they're going to change them this year because it's the 5th year. But I still know the goals because when I was meeting with community or when I was talking about, I knew exactly what the goals were. And it's really helpful to know that part. So I want to get you to that point because after that comes the other work that needs to be done, which is still part 2, I promise you, is how do you get to progress monitoring and what does progress monitoring look like? And I will coach you to get to that point because there's a way to develop your reports, and what I'll send to you is I'll send to superintendent a set of slides so that you can start to just digest what progress monitoring means. Because it's different for whatever the superintendent or team decides how to pull their reports together and what's going to do. But there's key elements that go into a progress monitoring report. And then there's some key activities that the board has to do. So what has to happen is you need to schedule progress monitoring as part of your board meetings. And it will become a regular item, progress monitoring. And progress monitoring will also be an action item because you'll take action on that progress report. You're approving the report that comes in. And so the board has the opportunity to either approve the report not approve the report or table the report. And oftentimes the report is tabled only because maybe there wasn't enough information and you want the superintendent to give you something else. But I will say in your first years, you will always approve the report because your guys are gonna, your socks are gonna be blown off. You're gonna go, oh my gosh, how come we never did this before? Because it does make a whole lot more sense to you in terms of where your students are. You start to understand all the hard work that they're doing, and it gives them an opportunity to really share with you how all that work is going into it. And we'll talk more about...
May I ask a question
Yes.
on that? What does the voting, the approval or the disapproval or the tabling of a report have to do? Are you, so are you, in my mind, I'm thinking approval of a document.
Yeah.
Because you can't go back for the works. Are they approving
Just the
the sheet
report.
of paper that's saying, you know, this is everything that's happened? Why would there be a, I guess, with your experience, why would there be a disapproval of something?
I haven't seen one. A disapproval would only happen if superintendent hasn't shown any progress. It's not moving in the right direction, and there's no willingness on the superintendent's part to want to alter the report. I've never seen that happen, but it's an option. Generally, the report is, the value of the report, so let me go back to this framework. This framework is never about gotcha, never about gotcha governance. It's always about what am I learning, what's happening, what are we doing? There have been, and you guys know this, there have been some board relationships with superintendents that can get snarly. That happens. It happens in any relationship. What I have seen is in this particular process is that it keeps it honest and it keeps it clean and it avoids that piece. Because what I have seen happen is that boards get snarly and they'll take action against the superintendent, which has happened, but they don't really have anything to really back it up, you know? And the superintendent has a lot of leverage in that point because it can say, you broke my contract, you didn't evaluate me, blah, 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 blah. So what I like about this are two things about the progress monitoring report. One is that it becomes an interim way for you all to evaluate your superintendent because you now have a progress report that says, she's showing we're on track, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, progress is going well, it's honest, and if it's not, if you're not making progress, it's still honest because she's got an action plan of what we're going to do to correct it. If a superintendent continues to bring you a report and there's no action behind it, you keep getting the same results, and there's no action or strategy behind it, then it's a form of evaluation, superintendent.
So you're approving,
Just the report.
approving the action, not the report.
Your
Am I overthinking it?
I think it's helpful to have, it's helpful to have the conversation like in advance so everyone's clear as to what the purpose of progress monitoring is. Of course, we recognize that we're providing the support and the guidance for you all to work with the district to do this, right? And we all have the expectation of these are our goals, this is what the different data that we need to see, right? I could anticipate, or I don't want to say I could anticipate, but what I would see where, for example, if we tabled a report would be like, there wasn't data presented to support that monitoring, right? So we can't effectively monitor you, and we're not receiving the information because data wasn't available, for whatever reason that would be, right? But if we know and we're on the same page moving forward, like, this is what we're agreeing to, this is what we want to see to be able to monitor how our students are doing, and you know this is what we're expecting, I don't anticipate that.
I'm not
So you're
saying,
overthinking it a little bit.
Yeah, that's my problem. I'm not sure if you were they would approve a document, right? The written narrative of whatever's happening. Or they're approving or disapproving the action or inaction.
They're just
to-
approving the report.
Just the report.
Just the report. They're not approving an action or saying, we don't like that you did, they're just approving the report. Just the content of the report.
To put it into record.
Yeah.
So then on an agenda, the superintendent report remains as, kind of just,
Yeah, you
these are
certainly,
things that have
Right.
occurred over the course of the month. And then in addition to that, there's going to be a strategic plan report.
or a progress monitoring report, yeah. I like the progress monitoring report because it lifts it up a little bit, and your superintendent report may change a little bit, because it's your progress monitoring report, you may have staff present, their
They're
data.
not the one responsible, their
Right.
staff may be presenting.
But your staff may be presenting their work towards that particular goal. What's really important, superintendent, is in a progress monitoring report, one of the major elements is that, let me see if I've got it on this one. It doesn't have it on here. But the major elements does it have data? Is it showing us is it showing us what the progression is? Like, is the line going up? Is it giving us a trend? Is there enough information that's being presented around what did we notice about it? What were some of the challenges? What were the opportunities? What is happening that's great? And if something's, what are some additional actions that we're going to be taking over the next 4 months? Because let's say you present it the next 4 months, here's what we're noticing. Because you may notice like, oh, we noticed that in this professional development that we did, and we offered this first one, well, we got 75% attendance in that, we're going to hit that other 25%. Because we noticed that there was something that, something came up. So I'm not making something up, it just depends. But it just has an action on that. But the most important piece of this report is you as a superintendent get to say, board members, you know what, I believe we're on track or we're not on track. And it's important to say that because if you're not on track, it's okay to be honest and to say, but here's why I know we're not on track. But here's what I'm going to do differently to try to get us on track. So the report serves that piece that you're talking about, Dr. Blake. It gives you guys a way to evaluate just the performance of where students are going and what's happening. And you're not waiting to the end of a school year or end of a time to evaluate the superintendent and you get the long survey, you have to just mark points. But now you have a document that also says of all the progress monitoring reports we did, she submitted 3, 4, we approved all 3 of them. They showed, really good progress, showed us great, progress towards the strategies that she mentioned. You've got some real tangibles in there, and it's not stuff that you're making up. That's important. But the second most important one, and I was telling Teresa about that I love about this, is that it also becomes a record for you as the board members because you're going to plateau. You always will plateau. Money is a factor. Money is always going to be a factor for schools. I've never been in any kind of profession in the public sector that has been fully funded. Let's agree, right? And you're going to plateau. But what's nice about your progress monitoring reports, you now have a record. You guys now have a report that you can also show to your legislators, that you can talk about and say, well, we've been doing this, and here's where we plateaued, and this is why we need this support. I am really, and this is me talking as a school board member, I'm really angry with the legislature believing that school board members are not doing their job. Or thinking that they need to take away local control. I don't believe that. I think local control is really important. And I believe board members are doing a hard job. It's a hard volunteer job. You don't get paid, and it's a lot to deal with. But this is also a way to help you frame where your work is and what you're doing, and to also demonstrate your governance and that you have set those priorities and that you're working towards those. It's really important. It's not as scary. It sounds scary, but it's not scary. I promise, superintendent, it's not scary.
If I can just emphasize, Superintendent Sandoval, I think these reports are really just for you to document and demonstrate the effort towards our goals. And for us to be able to see that, right?
Yes.
It's not to say like, these are the student outcomes, they should be accomplished, they're not accomplished, why aren't they accomplished?
Right.
It's really meant to be like a key performance indicator, right, throughout the progress.
And it puts it into perspective for you, because I know as a member, I talked about APS at the end of the year, and they would present our data, and I go, well, what the hell happened? You know, I didn't like that. I didn't like that as a board member, and it wasn't helpful to the superintendent either, or to the staff, because I felt bad, because I could see the staff, see our shoulders as the board members, and go, like, you know, what the hell? Like, what happened? And that's not, we need to be in the hunt with you all. We need to be your partners in that process. And so the more that we're in that reporting piece, we can see, yeah, they're working really freaking hard. You know, these things are really working. And it also supports you, superintendent, because if you're wanting to make a real significant change in some behaviors, and you're really, they're gonna help you. Like say, we really want this to happen. This really needs to happen. Because they're the ones that are also helping you to set that pace. So it's also helpful for you to have goals, right? Because then now it stratifies down to the staff saying, this is what the board has said. And it's not the board setting those priorities. Who's setting those priorities, guys? Oh, the community. The community set the priorities. Yeah, you guys are only acting on behalf of the community. You're the messengers for them, but you're carrying that forward. And so, and it also will be helpful because then you can tell parents, oh, no, this is what you all wanted us to be working on and focused on. And we're spending our energy doing that. And it'll give you tools, also superintendent and board, around the conversations around finances, what we have enough, what we don't have enough of, and you can also do better advocacy. So the next steps really are collaborative development right now with the superintendent is around the development of how to measure these particular goals that you have, to set the SMART goals, and then thinking about the guardrails in terms of what would be some first-year activities that you would use to demonstrate your effectiveness in meeting those guardrails. And then once you have that, presenting them to the board, they're going to be in draft. You guys are going to talk about them a little bit more. You're going to want to learn about the data, what are we using, and then at some point approving them and voting them in. And I will say, board members, once they approve whatever data they're going to use on that, that's at that point, superintendent, you might end up having a little bit of a workshop to give you an idea of how that data is, how the data works. Because you don't need to become an expert, you don't need to become all those, but you need to understand why they selected that data and how that data works, the frequency of that data, because you can't change, you don't get to change your goals for the next 3 years. Does that sound hard or awful? I'm just worried. No?
No, I don't think so. And my question on progress monitoring was really just clarifying, are they approving the action, or are they approving
The report. Just the report. Just the report. Okay, cool. So you just need to, superintendent needs to think of a timeline of when you will get that done and when it will be presented to the board. And then once that's done, just let me know. And then the next thing we'll talk about is how to set your calendar for when reporting is going to be done, how the progress monitoring report kind of gets set up. I'll send you sample reports, and then we'll go from there. But you're not going to be monitoring these until next school year anyway, so you're good. You're golden.
So we'll have everything for the next board meeting. To review.
Wow, you're fast.
That's ambitious.
That's ambitious, yeah. Any questions? Clear as mud? Have I scared you? Are you okay? It's Friday. Look, it's 3:15. Is that a good time to feel anything else that we need to do at this point? I think we got it all right, because we're going to type up what we have here.
And I've already shared it with Vanessa, so I can share it with you, Melissa. It's so that you have copies of whoever else wants all the notes, and then it's the template that you can do all your stuff in.
Yeah, okay. You type in your goals, put your action strategies.
Can you send the
Yes, the slides, yes, I'll send the slides. I'll send the slides from the first one. So I wish, but I don't think we can. But anyhow, I wish I had talked to Leanne before we came here, because I wasn't quite sure what we were going to do today, because I haven't been able to get you guys some NMSBA credit, but we'll try. We'll try to see if we can get you some credits for the training that you did today.
PED is thrilled for Stinky about making sure they work it out with the new stuff, but
We'll try. I'll try to do my best. See if we can. But you guys did some really hard work. I hope you feel like you did.
Well, if I could add something before we leave. So I know that the student outcome governance is, I don't want to say a fairly new idea. From what I understand, I think APS is one of the first school districts in the state to start implementing this. But there's several other school districts across the state that are now doing this.
Right.
So we, as a board, don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know, I've had discussions with the Rio Doso board, and they said, of course, at first it was overwhelming. We're like, oh my gosh, where are we getting ourselves into? And they said, once the wheel gets turning, you really get to see how it's improving our student outcomes. So we have resources outside of our school district to ask questions, look at their agendas, look at their reports, look at, again, do research outside of our district, because there's a lot of good work going on across the state. So we're not trying to implement something new, but me as a board member, I certainly look at other school districts to see what they're doing out there. And there's a lot of school districts that are doing this work already, so we do have resources.
You just reminded me of something really important. What I can do too is I'll send you a little homework. So I can send you video links to boards that are actually progress monitoring too, so that you can see what that looks like, and a copy of agendas, so you can see what that looks like. But you're absolutely correct. So the school districts that are currently engaged in this Ruidoso, Socorro, Truth or Consequences, Penasco, yeah, I forgot about Penasco is doing amazing. Just a little tiny school district, and they're doing an amazing job. I'm trying to think of these are our stronger schools. These are the 4 strongest. Of those 4, Penasco, Socorro, and Ruidoso are our strongest. Truth or Consequences is still doing their progress monitoring. I really like the work they're doing out there. And then now Aztec, I just trained Aztec, they're getting ready. They're in the same place where you are. They're identifying their goals and their guardrails. They haven't done that yet. Bloomfield is doing that. Aztec has also received some training. They've already started progress monitoring, but they were doing it before I came in, so we're going to be restructuring some stuff. But APS has been doing it now. They're in their 5th year. So, yeah, so it's really, I would say for me as a board member, it was a game changer for me as a board member, because it made more sense to me. I understood where our students were and what was happening, what was working, what wasn't. It really helped me with finance decisions. Really helped me understand more about like how our money was being spent and where it was. And it really helped me a lot when it came time for curriculum decisions. To thinking about, because now I was curious more about how that curriculum would be implemented, how it aligned with the goals that we had for like math and reading, because we were adopting a new math curriculum at that time. So I was really interested in that part. And then it really helped me a lot in terms of evaluation with the superintendent. I felt like it was a more honest evaluation, because I knew what we were talking about. There was more context for it. The other thing that I really liked that it did, because I left the board, I liked the continuity that it brought to the next board. Because there was governance that didn't get disrupted. And so the new board members coming in fell into a framework, and they fell into that rhythm as well. Socorro had that because they had to shift over into new board members, and they've come in and they're just continuing to do their work. And I really liked it for that reason.
And from the superintendent's perspective, instead of being one person and is trying to make sure that all 5 people are being satisfied with what their goals are. It's the team of 6 that you have identified your goals and you're working together as a team. And so that's very helpful to have that support. You know, when you have those teachers that are pushing back, that have maybe been there for 30 years and they're not changing, then you have that support. It's like, well, these are our goals. Are you doing what you need to do to support this goal? So it helps in those situations. So you feel like you have a support system with your goals and moving forward with that.
If I may recommend, we talked before, I guess mentioned a little earlier that it would be maybe a 3-year strategic plan, but do you, based off of that and board continuity and superintendent's quality, would you recommend maybe a 5-year plan? Or?
I don't really, I think for APS we went 5 only because we were working at a national level with the Council on Great. So AJ Craybill came out and did our training. And the urban school districts are all working with a 5-year plan. What I've noticed, and this is just me because I'm the one that's training school boards now, and I've noticed, I've only got one board right now has a 5-year plan. Everybody's going with 3. And it seems to be working for them. David has a really good rationale for why 3 sometimes works really well because of funding cycles. He says it's easier now, plus the election cycles. But it hasn't disrupted, so Rui Doso, for example, is on a 3-year plan. And even with the election cycle, it didn't disrupt their work. It hasn't disrupted TRC at all as well. And they had, I think they had 1 new member come on. So, but it just, as long as you have that continuity and thinking, but it really should be what works for you. And what I like about this, and I will tell you, if AJ was standing here in front, he would say something probably a lot harder. No, it has to be 5 years. He's very, you know, he's very pedantic for me because he was just like, he has his ideas. I don't come with that kind of approach, and I like that CES doesn't come with that kind of approach either. Local control is really important. You guys know your community better. You guys know each other better. You know what works and fits for your culture. And I think you have the tools and resources to know what is best for you. So I think that's really your decision to make.
So, let's go ahead.
I'm sorry. In your tenure with APS on the board, you guys put the strategic plan in place. Did you see the outcomes grow?
Yes, that's important to say. Thank you for bringing that up. So our first year, obviously no growth. First year was no growth at all. We used the first year to kind of baseline. But in the second year, we started to see some gains. So we saw gains with, especially with our African American students, which was really interesting because they were falling behind in math really badly, and it was at the middle school level. And for some reason, that was the only group that jumped. It made me happy to see that. They did see some gains in the literacy side of it, but I think everybody was seeing gains because that was the introduction of the new, you know, the new letters, and everybody was doing that training. But what was good to see as a board member is that we could see progress, in something. What I did see progress in, I'm a post-secondary person because I was at Workforce Solutions, and what I really liked about that in the first year, I loved the baseline because it gave me an idea. You got to remember Albuquerque has like 13 regular high schools, 13 traditional high schools. But what I liked in that first year is they really baselined for us where AP courses were and where they weren't, where dual credit was available and where it wasn't, and where bilingual seal, because we use bilingual seal as another measure of success, where bilingual seal was offered and where it wasn't. And what was really important to our community was that bilingual seal we could see was traditionally offered in like schools where there was predominantly like Spanish speakers, but our 2 Northeast High campuses in El Dorado and like La Puebla, those students really wanted a bilingual seal program that wasn't offered. So there was like this difference, but in the South Valley schools where I was represented, we didn't have a lot of AP courses. And so they put together in that first year, because I didn't get to see but I've seen the plans now as they're doing it, they've made progress and there's gains. So what they did is they came up with a real specific plan of how they were going to include more AP, more of these pieces, and the bilingual SEAL program has actually increased. I mean, when I started out with APS, I think we had like 500 SEALs. This last year, I think they hit almost 4,000 in SEALs. So yeah, I saw growth, and I still continue to see growth as a constituent. I'm happy because I'm a school board junkie. But I pay attention because it's important to me too. I have grandkids in the district, so I want to see them do well.
I have one last question, that's okay. So is this something we as a board can use as like a tool for our board self-evaluation?
Yes. Oh my God, you are so far ahead of me. That's part 2. So the other tool that I'll go ahead and send, so I need to write down everything I need to send. So I'm going to send you some link to boards, but I'm going to send you the framework. So there's a framework, and it's a board self-evaluation tool that tells you that you're becoming effective. And there's like those categories that I was talking about that are important, and it tells you how much progress you've made as you're moving along. And we'll talk about that board self-evaluation tool. So boards that are adopting this framework are evaluating themselves at least once a quarter. The other way that you're evaluating yourself is that you're also taking and you're reviewing your minutes of your boards, like how many minutes you actually spend in your board time, how much of that is actually spent discussing student outcomes. The standard, I mean, everybody would like to get to at least 50% of your board time spent on discussing student outcomes, and you can get there. You really can, because there's a lot of things that you can count towards that. But the framework will also tell you if you're making progress. Like I will tell you, you've already moved from column 1 to column 2 in just setting goals, because you guys are already moving there. And once you adopt them, you get to move to like the third category. So it is definitely a wonderful tool, and I can train you on that.
Questions from the board, superintendent? Questions about that? Just actually thank you both for your time today. So it's exciting to be starting moving forward during this process, so that we
I
can.
think it's great.
Yeah, so thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
And I'll add you to my email list. So what I usually do is I will send out, I send tips and just documents, but I usually send it to just the board chair and superintendent, and then feel free to email it and share it with your board. I don't do that because I don't want to cause rolling quorums and all that good stuff, so I will communicate with you.
Thank you.
Okay.
If there's no other questions, we will be adjourned. So if I can have a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn the meeting.
A motion by Dr. Blair, do I have a second? Second by Dr. Mazur. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Meeting adjourned. Motion passes, and it is now 3:28.